All right.
Hello, and welcome back to another fun-filled episode of the Hammercast. I'm your host, Alex, the Hebrew Hammer Salkin. And on this episode, I have a very special guest, one that I am grateful that I was even able to track down. This is a guy whose videos I have been watching for years and years, and was able to make contact with him and had my people get in touch with his people. And we finally came to an agreement, about him coming on my podcast. So I'm joined by Matthew Shoffner, who is, I think, can only really be described as a one-arm pull-up artist. He's not even really he's like beyond master level. He's an artist at this point. And
Too
we're going to be
generous.
talking a great deal about how he built up his prodigious strength, how he maintains it, because now he's got a couple of kids and, he probably has more important things to do than working out for a couple hours a day in the gym, but still has incredible strength levels. And we're going to talk about that, as well as a little bit of that journey leading up to such incredible strength. And before we begin, I always like to remind my audience, if this is the first time you've ever heard my voice at the very least, or this podcast, I have a 9-minute kettlebell and bodyweight challenge that is 100% free, 110% awesome, I am told. And it comprises of some very simple, not one-arm chin-up stuff, but some very simple, easy to learn kettlebell and bodyweight movements that involve the full body. So stuff like crawling, loaded carries, and other kind of gait pattern movements that help to tie you together, make all of your other disparate strength movements from the lower body to the upper body stronger, easier to do, and more fun. And you can get that if you go to 9minutechallenge.com. So that's the number 9minutechallenge.com. Go there, get your own copy. It'll be a whole ton of fun. I promise you that. So now, without further ado, Matt, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Like I said, I've been watching your videos for a long time. I think it was probably a couple years ago. There were a couple in particular that I remember made the rounds. The ones that impressed me the most and the ones that seemed most plentiful were the ones with the one-arm chin-ups. Now, I would be willing to bet that you probably didn't just one day walk up to a pull-up bar and like, oh, I can do one-arm pull-ups. There was probably some sort of like a process leading up to it. So,
Yes.
it's such a rare feat to see somebody doing it. And the one thing I'm most interested in knowing is, how did you get to that point to begin with? But like from the origins, like, were you a gymnast as a kid? Did you just kind of discover strength and fitness later on? What's like your fitness origin story?
It's not that surprising, to be honest. Initially, I would say around, I don't know, middle school, 6th or 7th grade or so, I got into Dragon Ball Z, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was hooked. I was like, I got to get like this guy. I got to start training, and I gotta get it in. And so I would just, me and my brother, every night, or it started as commercial breaks. We had a little pact going on, little competition.
Mm-hmm.
And every time there was a commercial break, we'd knock out push-ups and try to do push-up the entire commercial break, right?
Wow.
And it would alternate push-ups, sit-ups, stuff like that. And we just got hooked. I'm like, oh, you're never gonna catch me. I'll be better than you, blah, blah. And I'm gonna like this guy one day. And that's where it started. So it was pretty tame by all measures. I was never a gymnast. I never had a gymnast background or anything like that. So
Now, if I recall, I think I remember having read this at some point. You did wrestling in high school?
yes. Mm-hmm.
I'm very curious about this because I feel like I was kind of a geek in high school. I didn't do any sports or any physical activity, but I feel like wrestling is one of the best introductions to all sorts of like goofy strength. Like so many wrestlers that I have met or encountered through my years, I've found that they have just incredible strength levels, even if they don't train all that seriously. Do you think that in addition to some of the calisthenics stuff that you did as a youngster, contributed to your strength later, or do you think that was just maybe more contributed to your athleticism?
First off, I want to say wrestling's the greatest sport of all time.
Yes, absolutely.
And the oldest. But I think I was already to a point where I was very strong. I was always a little guy, still a little guy today. But coming into high school, I was about 80, 90 pounds. And of course, there's always a need for a 103 pounder, right? There's not many small guys in high school, especially when they're going through puberty and growing up and stuff like that. But luckily I've always been tiny. So they're like, hey, you should come out and wrestle. And this was a couple years after me and my brother and friend had begun like our whole anime Dragon Ball Z type training deal. And so I was already pretty strong. And I started to realize that I had pretty good muscle fiber quality, you know, so I was pretty strong. I developed myself pretty well. And as I got into wrestling, I sort of had a more of a focus where my strength should go, right? Because the other thing about wrestling is mostly pulling, but there is some sort of the pushing aspect. You always want your opponent close to you, right? And pull-ups is just that, right?
Yeah.
So my coach at the time, because I didn't do pull-ups before that. I would do some on the playgrounds, playing around with my brother. And but didn't do too much of it until high school wrestling. And they took us to the gym. I had never been to a gym before. They put me under a bench press with football players. And no, I'll take it back. I've been to the gym before. And that was towards the end of middle school. I played football. But I never did pull-ups or anything like that. And at that point, I was like, let's get it. And we were just in there all the time training. And that's where my foundation, I guess, well, not my foundation, but the secondary level of that foundation got elevated. So.
And knowing wrestlers like I do, I have a good friend who's been on the show before, Rob Akers, and he was a wrestler. He's been doing some coaching of wrestlers. It seems like they have a pretty decent, well-rounded strength protocol because they do a lot of high rep stuff, a lot of like high rep calisthenics, but they also do some heavy lifting. Now, how much of an edge do you feel that you got from kind of starting things off with the high reps and then later working on low reps? Do you think it mattered at all, or is that just kind of incidental?
100% mattered. 100%. I can be honest with you and say that I was a trash wrestler my first year. Absolutely trash. My only redeeming quality was my strength. I think from high school to college, anyone I stepped on the mat, I was always stronger than them. I was never the weaker opponent on the mat, ever. Nice. But I was rarely ever the best skill-wise. So I wasn't like a true muscle head. I had a few good techniques that I could work. I had fireman's carry was my best move. I was really good in the clinch, obviously, being a shorter guy, shorter arms, stronger. Yeah. But if it wasn't for my strength and my training, I would have not been good. And I'm a pretty hard worker. Like, I don't like to lose. I'm very competitive. And it doesn't sit right with me to take an L and hold that L, you know, I got to get back in there. Yeah. And that's another quality that helped me get there. But the strength definitely helped. High reps and strength made a huge difference.
Now, you have some people who are like really big on calisthenics training, like just don't like to touch weights. But I've seen you in a couple of your videos lifting some pretty heavy dumbbells for you. I mean, I think one of the videos you were like 135 pounds and you were pressing maybe 100, like, I could be completely wrong, but they were massive dumbbells is what I recall, like relative to your weight. Does this sound familiar?
Yes.
How much would you say the weight training side of things has helped your calisthenics versus a calisthenics with the weight training? Do you think that there is more carryover from one to the other, or is it about equal?
I definitely think you need to do both. I know a lot of people frown upon the stricter movements that come with bodybuilding and weightlifting, but I'm a pretty analytical guy. I like to approach anything I do with solid reasoning. I like to break things apart while we do it, how it's done, and how can we maximize each and every aspect of that movement, right? So I realized early on that you should never throw away any tools you have at your disposal, okay? And that's what a lot of calisthenics people were doing. And to this day, they still do. They say, oh, you couldn't do that because it's counterintuitive. You'll get too big, and when you get too big, you can't do certain things. Some of that has merit, right? If you're a bodybuilder, you want to avoid explosive movements and movements that go outside of your range, your normal range, because you will get a tear, you will get hurt, right? But you can do movements like you do kettlebells. So you know, you can move heavy weight in a way that is still natural. And that's what I always try to accomplish, you know? So even with curls, curling is a very natural movement. Like you're going to curl every day of your life, whether it's like a side curl up here, whatever you do, you're gonna curl things.
Yeah.
So when I lift weights, I make sure to curl from different areas. I'll curl strict, I'll curl a little bit loose, hammer curl, stuff like that. But it's always good to develop that strength. Don't ever, I tell everyone I ever train, don't ever throw away any valuable tools in your kit, ever.
Yeah, I really agree with that. And I think the big thing people forget, and I know that you were a trainer for some time, so you
Yes.
probably saw people who would do this, is they're like, well, you know what, I'm only going to do the compounds because that's like the real strength training. And like curls, all that other stuff, that's just bourgeois bodybuilding stuff. But they forget that, for instance, in the pull-up, primary muscles that you're working with are going to be the back. And your biceps will definitely get some stimulus, but they're not going to get as much. And so eventually you're going to get to the point where there's an imbalance. So part of it, what sounds like what you're saying, is that you need this balance between the different muscle groups, even with by using so-called isolation movements to strengthen the compounds. Was this something that featured heavily in your road to the one-arm chin-up, or is this something that you kind of just started figuring out along the way when you wanted to start adding more to your repertoire?
I learned that I was in the military, right? And a big thing they teach in the military is train how you fight, right? So what I learned to do was see why I was doing this movement and what muscle groups I would need to do that. And like you said, if you're doing a standard pull-up, you're going to work more with your back than your biceps. And you notice the injuries people get from the pull-ups and the chin-ups, where are they? They put too much pressure on their biceps, their forearms. You rarely hear injuries about their back, right?
Yep.
Because the back is pretty huge, right? But at the same time, one thing, you're a trainer, so if you do chin-ups, you curl like this, you're not doing it properly because you're just putting so much weight on those biceps. And if you don't train those biceps previously, they're not going to handle that load. So that's where the curling and other exercises come. It's like if you're doing just basic calisthenics training, you never do how do you say it, deadlifts or lower back extensions like that. You're never going to get that lower back development like you want to.
Yeah.
So it's always good to incorporate those into your routines. You would definitely get stronger and you'd be more flexible and more resilient. You won't get injured as quickly or at all.
Absolutely. Now, on that topic, have you ever had any injuries that are like really serious ones? Not like a tweak or anything like that, but
no. I've had my biggest injuries came from wrestling and the military, not from calisthenics training. I did have an injury on my my forearm, but it was like just a pull. It's nothing serious. And that came because I decided to jump on one-arm pull-ups after not training for a couple months. I got busy traveling, all this stuff, and I was like, man, let's get on there. I knocked out like 30 or 40 or whatever, not in a row, of course, but like my usual one-offs. And I didn't warm up, didn't stretch. It was stupid, and it was a minor pull, but that's it. Throughout the years, I haven't got injured because I followed my I guess procedures actively, not to step out of line.
Now, I am curious about your procedures in particular, because it sounds to me like, okay, I've done one-arm push-ups for ages, but I've never really spent much time working on the one-arm pull-up because I kind of figured out quite some time ago that I was like, all right, look, I can see that this is going to be way beyond me. And so if I try to like skip a few levels, I'm going to end up regretting it big time. So beyond doing stuff like one-arm lock-offs and then playing with those every once in a while, I was like, you know what? I need to put in some serious work before I can build up to it. What are some of the procedures that you think are crucial? Because it's not like most movements where it's like, okay, you just progressively add more weight or more reps and then
doesn't work that way.
No. So what's the one arm pull up seems like it's a totally different animal. So what are some of these considerations one has to make, and what kind of a procedure do you take in order to just have the base to be able to do it safely, not strength wise, but even just safety wise?
Like I said, I'm super analytical, right? And I approach things very carefully when it comes to training and anything in life. I'm just how does it work? Why am I doing it? How can I do it the safest? And how can I do it the most efficient and the best? Because I'm very competitive. I want to be the best.
Absolutely.
So, and I knew early on that this was dangerous. It's just common sense. You have all your weight on some of the most mobile joints in your body, right? You have your wrist, which shouldn't be a problem. You do it right, but it can be. Your wrist, your digits, your fingers, they take on way more weight, your elbows and your shoulders. So, of course, the biceps and the chest. A lot of people don't realize that your chest has a lot to do with this. And I tell people that you need to work your chest. Don't just go to pull-ups without working your chest. You're gonna regret it. So what I tell everyone is you need to develop your strength, but you must not treat the one-arm pull-up like a pull-up. It's not. All right. People like to say, oh, your body's leaning to one side. You need to fix your form, do it straight up like this. And I said, that's not how it works. If you know anything about balance, you know that that's not how balancing you're centering yourself works. You need to make sure that you're aligned properly. And so it looks like a lot of times like, oh, he's not even straight up. I've seen other guys do it straight like this and keep your body straight. And of course, I can do that. It's not difficult. Well, it's kind of difficult sometimes, but that's not the point. I do it like this for a reason, right? Because it alleviates some of the pressure off those vital points and allows me to maintain a better, more fluid movement. It's more natural, right? And I tell people all the time, it needs to feel natural. You need to understand what you're doing. So as far as injury goes, I got a little distracted there. I tell people to make sure that a few things are there first. You're slightly flexible, not too flexible, but make sure you're hydrated, you're flexible. You never, ever fall, right? A lot of people do pull up and just drop and come back up. You don't do that. Even with two arms, don't stop it. Don't do that.
Bad idea.
Always control your descent. That's one of the biggest things I can ever. And another big thing that happens, a lot of professionals seem to miss for some reason. Do not train any high level exercise or movement or heavy weight without being semi-fresh. Don't fatigue yourself and do these things ever. All right. And I don't care if you're bench pressing, you're squatting, heavy weight. Don't walk into these movements fatigued. A lot of people think, oh, you got to hit it, go hard, knock out rep. You're tired. That's great. Go back in there and add more weight. That's not how it works. All right. That's why you see me do one at a time and switch off. Right. Because I can do more for longer, and that keeps me safe as well. So people aren't saying when you're fatigued, you're going to get injured. Stop.
Yeah.
Just stop.
Yeah. I think professionals should understand. And you point out some people just you would think exactly. It's pretty common knowledge, or I thought it was common knowledge that you do whatever is like skill work has to come first,
Yes.
Then after that, the stuff that maybe doesn't require as much skill, or you have the technique really dialed in and you can manage while you're fatigued, then you can engage in that stuff. But yeah, the last thing you want to do, especially with something that's putting so much pressure on so many of your tissues, is to just throw the dice and be like, all right, let's see how it works. We got to keep pushing, got to keep going harder. Now, I know that nowadays you've got, you're no longer working as a trainer, but it sounds like you've still kept up your strength. So
yes.
How often would you say, now, how often do you practice the one-arm pull-up? Is this something that's like makes its way into your regular diet of activities, or just every once in a while you just maintain it?
Yeah, I do it all the time.
I would too, because if I could do it, I feel like I would never do anything else. You know what I mean?
It's weird because I break up my weekly routines into what every bodybuilder does. Chest one day, biceps and back the other, legs. People think I work legs. Lower back, everything. I break it up. And for my one-arm pull-up days, they're my bicep days. Some people say, why not your back day? But I do other things for my back, right? But not one-arm pull-ups.
I can only imagine how difficult your back days must be if one-arm pull-ups don't even make it into the back days.
Because I've done weighted pull-ups a lot, right? Have you seen those videos? That's where my back intensive stuff comes in. And once again, do not walk in these exercises fatigued, right? And if you look at what I do for back, it's not as rep heavy as one-arm pull-ups.
Okay.
So I like to keep those separate because fatigue is the enemy of technique. Trust me, your technique will break down when you're tired. So what I like to do is keep the heavy bench press weeks or days with the heavy weighted pulls. And sometimes I'll skip like a whole week or two from either one and focus on the other, high reps or heavier weight. You got to keep the body surprised, I guess, and
I'm
that's how
glad to hear you mention that. I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm glad to hear you
no, you're
mention
fine.
the high rep and the heavy weights. You keep these on like completely separate like cycle? Or are you doing
Completely.
like or you just
That's it.
periodically like do you do like a finisher, like a high rep finisher, or is it like this couple weeks I'm going to do high reps, this couple weeks I'm going to do heavy? How do you approach it?
No, I never mix them. I don't mix them. I don't believe in that. I think it's counterproductive. Um, what the closest I will get to that is 1 week I'll do high reps, and the next week I'll do heavier weight. And if I do one arm pull-ups in the heavier week, I only do low reps, if that makes sense. So
It
my
does.
high rep days for one arm pull-ups, I'll hang on the bar longer with each arm with each rep and knock out maybe 5 in a row, right? But on the days where I'm working heavy back, I'll only do one at a time and be done. One at a time, let go. Because I've tested it, I just assume it's the case. But when I was training for breaking the world record in the heavy one arm pull up and also the weighted pull up, I tried doing them all together. Didn't work. I saw a net decrease in everything.
Interesting.
And yeah, so if you're a heavy a bench press in a competition, a lot of them do like 1 or 2 max reps and then they'll burn out. I don't do that. I don't think that's effective. And I've been pretty heavy bencher for my weight.
Yeah.
And I've seen way more gains, less injury, and just all around better results by maintaining what you're doing. And don't try to mix it in. If you're a sprinter, you're not going to be running cross country at the same time expecting to be faster in your 100-meter dash, right? It's not going to happen. That's not what you do. You train the way you want to perform. And you can't have your body trying to be a cross country runner as well as a sprinter, a top sprinter. It's not going to happen. That's why you stick to your lane, right? So that's the way I approach all of the exercises there.
That makes good sense. And, I think probably at maybe we'll say like up to intermediate levels, that maybe it doesn't matter as much if you mix things up because you are at a level where you can still expect to make gains in multiple directions. But as you get to higher levels, like what you're talking about, your body's recovery capacity is probably really going to be tested quite a bit more.
Yes.
And you might still have the ability to do more work. But if the goal is to push your abilities into one specific direction, anything else that you're adding on that's superfluous or does not add to that particular goal is probably only going to detract from it. So you might still make gains, or like you pointed out, it might just be a net negative and you end up with less of everything overall.
You'll kind of stall. You just stall because your body, well, my body, would get to a point where it would do what it could for both, right? Try to get that happy medium.
Absolutely. Now, here's the next question on the topic of high reps, because one of the things that I have found in my own research, and I'd be curious to hear about your approach, we'll say like a couple of categories. So, you got the compound movements. We talked about those. We've got we'll say the so-called isolation exercises that you'll find in bodybuilding. But then there are other considerations in your training. We've talked briefly about one of them, like higher reps versus, low reps and, really heavy. But another one that I'm very curious about, and I would love to hear your experience on, would be isometrics training. Do you ever do it? Do you find it valuable, or does it have like any particular use that might be useful to somebody on the path, let's say, to one-arm pull-ups?
Yes, they're useful. I would say that.
Now, how did you use them specifically?
For my core.
Okay.
Yeah, because if you think of isometric exercises, what are you doing, right? You're locking yourself into a specific stance, right?
Yep.
That's very important when it comes to one-arm pull-ups. And that's why I tell people, if your back allows it, learn to do planks and ab wheels, right? Because what that does is it develops your core to a point where you can remain stable. And stability is key for balance, no matter what you do. And that's why I think isometrics are very important. So I do agree they do play a part in one-arm pull-ups, even the weighted pull-ups. You have to have a strong core. Not so much for like certain handstand movements when that translates into pull-ups, but I wouldn't do it then. But core definitely, for sure.
Yeah. And in particular, when it comes to core training. So you're talking about, you mentioned plank, ab wheel. I don't
Front
know if you ever,
levers.
front levers. Yeah, absolutely. Did you ever find, or do you find also that stuff like leg raises play much of a role, or is the actual provided you're getting ab work in, does it really matter which moves you're doing, or there are some that are better and some that you just think aren't that necessary?
Personally, I don't like leg raises too much,
Mhm.
because what they do is they tend to promote, unless you're doing it like you're bending your elbows, but if you lock yourself out, you're promoting that sort of development when you're doing leg raises, right?
Mhm.
And I don't really want people in that position on a one-arm pull-ups ball. You know, that makes sense?
Yeah.
And it may not seem related, but I found that it does do something. It's weird. It puts more stress on your shoulders, and it keeps things elongated more. And I don't really like it when I'm doing training for my one-arm pull-ups. I don't like it.
Very interesting. So you're more of a, because I've seen a variety of different types of one-arm pull-ups, and sometimes you'll see like their feet will come up in front almost as like they can't help it in a way. You know what I'm talking about? Like
That's a stability issue and balance, yeah.
interesting.
And weakness too. Yeah.
And so from your take, now you mentioned that you can't approach one-arm pull-up training as though you would train regular pull-up training.
Exactly.
But one thing that where maybe there is a similarity is the expectation of keeping the core and the legs stable, so that when you're pulling yourself up, you're not wiggling all over the place and your legs aren't just dangling there, but they've got to stay as like one solid unit.
Yes, correct.
Interesting.
100%. 100%. I agree with you.
Good. I'm glad I got that. That sounds like that will be very valuable. It makes me think, okay, I need to make a couple of tweaks to my own training. I'm not quite at one-arm chin-up territory yet, but this is
And
good to keep in mind.
I do not recommend one-arm chin-ups. I don't.
Okay, so now let's talk about the difference. So when we say pull up, generally what we mean is a palm facing away, like you're going to give somebody a high five. Chin up, palm facing you, or the supinated position where it's, you can look straight into your palm. What do you not like about one-arm chin-ups versus one-arm pull-ups?
If you're on a higher level, you can do them sparingly, because I had to do them to develop my heavy weighted pull-ups. It was a great way to develop that. But especially beginners, I would not recommend. Oh, so many injuries I've seen happen from it. Even with two-handed pull-ups. With weighted pull-ups, I've seen so many videos of the bicep detaching. And that's not as strenuous as a one-arm pull-up. You may not believe it, but it's not. Yeah. And a lot of calisthenics artists will try to bang these out, right? Don't do it. Yeah. I've seen hyperextending your elbows happen a lot more, because as you know, you have too much pull on the bicep. Yeah. Right? It's too much. It's too much. And I would only recommend doing those if you're at a certain level. Gotcha. Because it's tempting, because they're easier. The first few one-arm chin-ups are a lot easier than the pull-ups, right? Because you're focusing so much, it's like a raw power move. Yeah. And then you're done. But I do not recommend those beginners. It may be a great confidence booster, but I would avoid them at all costs. Interesting. So it's easier because the bicep allows you to maybe gives you a little bit more help, but it's also potentially more dangerous because you're more relying on the bicep. Interesting. And if you look at your body will do one of these, and you'll bring everything in to get there, right? I see that. That's not what happens when you do a pull-up usually. It's like, you see this happen. Yeah. But with a chin-up, you'll see this happen, right? Yeah. And with that contracts everything. So it's a much powerful, it's way more powerful. It's a power move. But what happens is you will tear that bicep to get injuries. I wouldn't recommend it. Would not recommend it. And then they always drop. I don't know why. They'll just go. Yeah. Wouldn't do it. I wince every time I see that, because I'm like, man, all it's going to take is like one time where you go like a millimeter further than you were expecting. Yep. And you're going to be in agony for sure. Oh, yes. Now, okay, so then another question. This is on the completely opposite side of the spectrum. If I recall correctly, I saw a video of you doing like a one-arm handstand push-up of sorts. Yeah, I think I was the first person to ever do it. I think you were too. legitimately and get it filmed. There was no kipping. It was, granted, it wasn't a wall, but I know for a fact that the upper portion of that move is much harder on a wall because of the friction.
Yeah, for sure.
Just alone. So I could do if I practice balance. I didn't want to learn a handstand. I was kind of lazy.
Yeah.
But definitely I think I was the first one to do it because they told me it couldn't be done. They're like, you can't do that.
You're like, watch me.
Yeah, just because Vegeta does it, I mean, you can do it, right? I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, guy. All right, got it. So, so I had to change my entire training regimen to do that. And train how you fight, man. Train how you fight.
Yeah.
And I switched everything around, and that's how I got it. And I still haven't seen anyone do it without like actually kipping or weirdness. And my body was awkward, right? And I got a lot of hate for that. But it wasn't
from people who couldn't do anything close to that, by the way. That's all the hate on YouTube comes from people who don't even have videos. So feel good about that.
And it wasn't necessarily a weakness issue because the hardest part of that movement is getting your head off the floor, not the lockout, right? And what I did was try to align my body. If you draw a line, you'll see that my body's like this, right? Because you do a a handstand push-up with like this, it's not going to work, right? You have to, even the performers, if you see how they do it, they make sure the body's in a line. You can't just have your arm out here banging them out, right? It's not going to work
like that.
And I think a lot of people saw me doing like, that's not real.
Well, again, the funny thing about these like YouTube commenters is that, again, they never have videos of themselves doing it. None of them can demonstrate anything close to it. So I remember seeing it and I thought, okay, it looks kind of like a little bit more like a side press, but like, why wouldn't it? Because you're literally moving your almost your entire body weight. Okay, so you're not necessarily moving your forearm. Everything above that has to be involved. So that's like what, like 95% of your body weight.
Easy. That was the hardest movement I've ever done.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, it was so tough. I got it relatively quickly. It took me just a few months. And I stopped shortly after. I was like, I did it. But I could have cleaned the form a bit. But I think it's important to understand that if you see like performers and they do a handstand push-up, their arms and their legs are like this, and they're balancing themselves, right? And that's kind of what I was going after, but not using that kipping motion with the legs.
Yeah.
Kick off of the legs to help you get that lockout point. And I remember the first time getting on there, putting my head down and trying to push off. And I was like, what is this? It was the hardest thing ever. So I had to go back to the gym and I trained heavy one-arm presses. It's really hard to get that motion down, but heavy standing presses, all that stuff, and just tried to get myself into that mode. But it was tough, man. It was tough.
Now I can only imagine. So what is the role of like assistance work in something like that? So, I would say both one-arm chin-up and then crazy stuff like the stuff that none of the listeners are ever going to do, to be honest, like the one-arm handstand push-up. I think you're going to remain one of the few to actually manage to do that. But
I hope not.
Well, no, I hope a lot of people will be inspired and will train for it. But it's definitely, like you pointed out, when we were chatting a little earlier, people are like, I want to do one-arm chin-ups. Like, well, how many, or one-arm pull-ups? How many pull-ups can you do now? Oh, like 5. It's like, well, you were putting up the cart way before the horse, man. You're going to need to rethink this. But what are some of the things that you do to keep these crazy amounts of strength in your compound movements from overpowering certain muscle groups and underpowering others? Do you include a fair amount of assistance work, and like what kind of stuff would you do?
As far as assistance, what do you mean?
So for instance, like I saw a video of you doing, you were in the gym and you were doing like dumbbell bench press, a bunch of pull-ups, and then you were doing like curls and tricep push downs. And, obviously the curls and the push downs are going to be great for making sure that your upper arm doesn't lag behind when you're doing stuff like, one-arm chin-ups, likewise heavy bench press and stuff like that. So do you do any stuff like, let's say, direct arm work or direct shoulder work that kind of helps you to fill in any of the gaps that might sneak in while training these movements?
I do, and a lot of shoulder raises. That's a big thing. But if you just look at a standard bodybuilder routine and you see why they do those, sure, they are for looks, right?
Yeah.
But their main purpose is to develop those muscles. And that's what you want to do because you want those muscles to perform. So if let's say you're trying to be the world's greatest bench presser, right? But if you only do bench pressing, you will never achieve your goal, right? You're gonna do leg work, you're gonna do core work, you're gonna have to do even some neck work sometimes. You're gonna have to do shoulder work and tricep work. And I think the same applies to any movement on pull-up bar. You're gonna have to make sure that you knock out tricep extensions or press downs, everything, so that when it's time for those small muscles to actually kick in, they're not letting you down. I'd rather have my small muscles develop and not have to use them than to need them and they're not there when it's time, you know? It's always better to keep those things working. And it's just healthy in general. Just train all your muscles if you can, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. There seems to be kind of like an undercurrent in some segments of the fitness industry that want to like remove otherwise great exercises, like particularly in the bodybuilding sphere, because they're like, it's just, you know, like vain and what have you. But if you're not adequately training certain muscles that are going to help you with the moves that you do want to do, it only makes sense that you give them a little bit of extra attention.
Yep, exactly. And if you train properly, you're gonna look like a bodybuilder anyway.
Yeah,
just a low level bodybuilder. You're gonna develop your muscles anyway.
Yeah, you're not going to accidentally like wander out on stage and like win a bodybuilding competition, but people are going to think, "Oh my gosh, this guy must do bodybuilding," you know?
Yeah. Think about it. You're going to have six-pack abs. Your chest is going to be developed. Your shoulders going to be developed. Your everything's going to be developed. And you're going to like, "Oh, this guy's a bodybuilder." When's your next meet, guy? Like, nah, I'm just doing calisthenics. If you see a top calisthenics artist, they look like low-level bodybuilders.
Yeah,
because they understand that you need to work all these muscle groups. And that's just what it is, you know. Even a lot of people were initially saying that pistol squats were something you shouldn't be doing. And I go back and forth because if you have bad knees, then yeah, maybe you shouldn't be doing pistol squats like that. But there are healthier ways to work it, but you do need those muscle groups. So
definitely.
I say work them, you know. Definitely, yeah.
I'm curious to hear your take on the pistols then, because personally, like I've been doing pistols for ages. I don't do them with like a lot of regularity now. I just have a few different goals that I'm working on. But I've never had knee issues with pistols, but I've heard people talk about it. Now, do you think it's because they're weighting it too heavily? Or do you think it's just something about the nature of the move, just doing squats on one leg that causes issues to people?
It's not the weight, I don't think. The issue is most people can't stand on one foot without falling over, right?
Yeah.
And those same people will attempt something like a pistol squat. No matter how developed your upper body is, if you don't have good balance and you attempt a pistol squat, your knee's gonna do this. And that's never good. That's never good. You're gonna be shaky. And I've done a few pistol squats, and once you get the movement down, your knee should be like this. It shouldn't be on your toe here. You shouldn't be like this, right?
Yeah.
It's not too good for your knees. And that's what happens when a lot of people do pistol squats. And I think that's not something you want to put on your knees like that. But if you train properly and do it right, yes. Because I've seen guys that can squat like 400 or 500 pounds, can't do a pistol squat because they get shaky on one leg and they fall over, right? And they'll tear something. You have to learn how to get into that position, practice it, right? And I think that's a big issue. A lot of people jump into it and they don't understand that it's not really a power move. It's more of a technique and balance thing.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, 100%. Now, it seems to me like there is a common theme, you know, so pistols are of any of the bodyweight feats, I would say they're the most achievable strength wise. But a lot of people, it seems like they're like, oh, well, you know, why I can squat 300, 400, 500 pounds. Squatting my body weight on one leg shouldn't be a big deal. So, but they still skip over steps. It's like the people who want to do one-arm push-ups or one-arm chin-ups without having previously done the requisite strength work with the pistol squat. What really seems to be missing for a lot of people is the stability and the mobility. And if you get those in place, the strength is a lot easier to navigate. But without it, all you're going to do, like you pointed out, you're going to be grinding on the joints. You're going to be a hurting unit in pretty short.
Falling over and putting too much weight on the wrong places.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bad.
Now, if anybody, such as say, your interviewer right now is interested in like one arm pull-ups in the future, what are some prerequisites that you suggest to people to achieve before they even think about it? Like it could be a number of reps of like a regular pull-up. I'm sure a lot of us have heard, like you got to do at least 20 regular pull-ups before you even think about that or what have you. So what are like prerequisites that people should look for before they start doing the progressions that are going to get them to the one arm pull-up?
Well, I think 20 to 25 is a good number. Just to kind of keep people from trying when they do 5 or 10 pull-ups. I think that's good for that reason. But like we mentioned before, it's not just a pull-up thing. If you spend all your time working to get 25 pull-ups and then say, I'm ready, one arm pull-up time, you're going to fail. Because remember, it's going to be heavy on your chest, your shoulders, bicep. There are a lot of different factors involved. So you want to make sure that you reach an overall level of strength that you can handle that. And a good way to test that is just get into a position and just kind of descend. And if you can control that, we can start to work from there, I would say. If you just get up there and you're like, oh, let's not try it, right? Let's not try it. So I would say there are a lot of different tests you can do. Just kind of hang there, and how comfortable is that? Can you even get anywhere? Do you understand your body enough to know that you're not pulling from here, but you're pulling from here? So, stuff like that. There's different elements of knowing your body and how strong you need to be before you even attempt something like that. So
very interesting. And what do you think of some other movements? Because you mentioned the chest. So what are some other movements that people should think about training pushing wise in order to make sure that their one arm pull up adventures are not going to be completely, misplaced?
You're going to have to do a lot of push-ups, whether you like them or not. If you can, I know you can do variations, like maybe some dips would be better. If you have bad elbows or wrist or something like that, if you can work around those, definitely develop your chest. Maybe even some chest flies would be great. If you can't push that weight like that, I do all of them. I think you should do all of them. Chest flies work differently than push-ups, right? They're different movements. So you need to put all those in there. They're all important. So push-ups, chest flies, incline bench press, regular bench press. I don't do decline. I think it's a waste of time. What else? Overhead pressing is good. I like those. Handstand push-ups, dips, stuff like that. Just basic things. Nothing crazy. No secret exercise to do. It's all basic stuff. All basic.
No one weird trick to get your first one arm pull-up. It's all.
I get that all the time. What's the secret, man? I know you got a secret over there. I'm like, I don't.
The secret is you got to grow up watching Dragon Ball Z and decide you're going to be exactly like Goku and
or Vegeta. You can switch whatever you want.
Either way, exactly. Whoever you're most inspired by, for sure. That's excellent. No, I think these are some great pointers. You've got a book that I read that as we talked about, didn't get the kind of love that it deserved, because I think there were people who were thinking, oh, I'm just going to get this super secret ninja step by step, and then next thing you know, I'll be banging out one arm chin ups and stealing guys' girlfriends at the gym. And it's just,
don't do that.
No. What I liked about your book actually is that it's not that difficult to find other places where they give you the progressions, or at least other people's takes on the progressions and prerequisite standards. But you talked about a lot of the practicality of doing one. Like, okay, these are things you're going to have to think about. You don't want to be swinging all over the bar like a sausage, whatever. You're gonna need stability, so you need to focus on this. You're going to need to be mindful of your joints, so you're going to want to set your body up like this. Can you tell us, for anybody who wants to get it, what the name of your book is, where they can find it, and I'll of course be sure to put a link in the description.
What's the name of that book?
I'll look it up because I don't recall it either. Actually, I'm going to open up Kindle right now.
Concise Guide to One Arm Pull-ups, I believe, something like that.
I think it was. A brief overview of one arm pull-ups and how to master them your way.
And I put that in the title thinking it would be. It was ages ago I wrote that book, because a friend asked me to do it. He was like, "Man, just go ahead and help me out and release this." I'm like, "All right, sure." I typed it up and put it out there. But honestly, I think like a lot of people that. I didn't want my guide to be a carbon copy of someone else's suggestions, right? So I did my own thing. But after I wrote it, I went to look at other people's guides too. And I was like, what do they write? You know?
Yeah.
And not many of them focus on the balance issue and the stability of the workout and of your core. And I was like, this is like huge. They should be talking about this. And they all give you techniques that will help you get your pull-up. But what they all did, every last one of them, the assistants provided took away your ability to balance yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So let's say you get a towel and you work on your one-arm pull-ups.
Yep.
What are you really doing? Right. You're developing strength, but you're negating the like 50 to 80% of the balance needed.
Yeah.
And what happens when you let go of that towel?
Suddenly you can't control yourself.
Your body does that, right? And while if you want to get one pull-up like that, great, you might get it. But if you want to start ripping these out, you can't avoid understanding your body and what it takes to hold on to the bar and keep that moving, right? You know, a lot of times growing up, I don't know if you took gym class and they have you hold the bar and say, hold it until you stop swinging, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of people couldn't do it. They just kept swinging. You're like, oh, I can't balance myself. But if you're accustomed to that, you can hop on the bar and just stick, not move if you want to, right? And the same things for the pull-up. You have to be able to balance yourself, know when to pull. If I try to pull my body's out here or here, I'm going to get injured, or from here to here, right? So I have to make sure I'm always in a place where I know it's time to pull and descend. And holding a towel or standing on something to help you do it negates all of that. And I always say, don't do that, please. I would rather you hold your wrist. The best way to do it is hold your wrist, whatever you do. That way you're still kind of, okay, I can feel my body's going when I'm here or when I'm here, right? And you move from there. I don't like those assisted pull-ups where you're holding a towel or something. Don't do that. It's bad. Don't do it.
It makes perfect sense to me because I've seen that a lot with like one-arm push-ups, for instance. People will be like, my approach was start working on an elevation and then you just slowly work your way down as it gets easier. Because of that, exactly that. You want to do like a miniature version of this exercise that you're trying to do. And it's obvious if you're trying to, let's say, military press more. Okay, so I'll put less weight on the bar, but I'm going to try to keep my technique exactly the same. And that way, when I add more weight, the only thing that's changing, the only variable that changes is the weight. There's not anything else changing. And I think with calisthenics, people miss this because they're thinking in the weight training mindset. They're not thinking about, like what you pointed out, that the balance changes, the body position. If you're not training for that, you might get lucky and you might be able to just muscle out one rep, but you're not going to be knocking them off. Like
you can't maintain that. And it's funny you say that because a lot of calisthenics guys hate bodybuilders. I hate those routines. But they end up taking the same approach. But their approach works for them because of strict movement, right? If I'm curling, my curl form will never change. I'm just adding the weight, right? But when you do a one-arm pull-up, it's completely different. Like you're not just, until you can master all the parts of your body, right? So it's pretty funny you mentioned that, and they're like, nah, I hate bodybuilding, but I train like them, but I hate bodybuilding.
Yes, they're projecting, really is what it is. They're like, no, I would never do such a thing, but secretly, like all their notes in their head are really coming from, the muscle and
everything's coming from bodybuilding. How many reps you're doing, how many sets you're doing, your recovery time. This bodybuilding, the science behind bodybuilding allows you to know how fast we recover, what works, how many sets you need to do, all this stuff. So like I said, never throw away any important tools in your kit. Everything has a purpose. Use it to your benefit.
Agreed. And with that note, I think that a great tool for anybody's kit, if they are interested in doing one-arm pull-ups, would be the book, A Brief Overview of One-Arm Pull-Ups and How to Master Them Your Way by Matthew Shoffner, a true artist of the one-arm pull-up and a wide variety of other movements, and a gentleman, if I do say so.
Oh, well, thank you, sir.
Of course.
It's super short. It's like just a few pages, nothing crazy.
Yeah, it's a quick read, folks. So you don't have to worry about sitting down with a dictionary and being like, okay, I'm going to have all this gobbledygook to read through. No, it's quick, it's enlightening, and it will definitely give you some insight on the art behind these offset calisthenic strength moves, including one-arm push-ups, that you're not going to see other places because most of them are not keeping in mind exactly what you have talked about here, which is a sign of true mastery, I would say.
Yeah, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me like you did. If you have any questions about how things work or where I need to do, blah, blah, you just reach out to me. I'm fine.
Now,
I'll help you out.
great. So can I put your email address in the show notes as
Sure.
well for people to read?
Sure. I don't mind.
I'm also going to include your YouTube channel because I think that people should gaze and be amazed at your various videos. Do you have a website or any other social media that you people might be able to follow you on?
I only have Instagram. I think it's like Shoff Smash. I rarely post. Listen, I suck at this whole social media thing. I'm gonna start back and doing videos and maybe post more, but I really don't spend too much time on social media. And like I watch like YouTube videos, obviously, and
Sure.
I'll browse Instagram, but I'm never like posting and stuff. So I'll do better.
Listen, yeah, whatever you do, I don't want you to feel bad about not being, we'll say, good at really being good at social media is being bad at everything else. So I don't think that you have to worry too much about that. I think you have more than proven your value to the world of calisthenics, and I think that yeah, don't feel too bad. There are far more important things to do with your time than waste time on Facebook and Snapchat.
Yeah, I try to spend time with the family, and try to play with them more. So
I'm sure that your kids appreciate that you're not constantly scrolling through these,
Oh yeah. My son wants me to post more. It's like, Dad, just post some videos. They're so cool. I'm like, my editing is not there. I'm just putting stuff up because I only got on YouTube. True story. I only got on YouTube with my buddy as a competition. Like, I'll show him video format that I'm better than you, and I'll post it online, and it just kind of went from there. And I was just doing stuff and posting it. Bam. They're like, wow, that's cool. Can you do more of these? I'm like, sure. Because I grew up, I'm very fortunate. I have been around the top athletes and what I feel like is our generation, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you you probably don't know them, but I've been around state champions. I've trained with state champions. I've run up myself in state second place or something like that. But I have worked with great athletes, professional athletes. I was roommates with Derek Brunson, if you know Derek Brunson, Quincy Talley, all these great athletes that I've been around and been able to work with and train with and see how they work and how I work. And I've been blessed to be around such great talent, because the first one on Pullup I even saw was from a guy who was 200 pounds, he was on a wrestling team, like, hey, Shoff, can you do these? And he just knocked him, just bam, knocked one out. And I was like, all right, let's go. And I started working with him and I got it, but just crazy athletes, man. And I've been really blessed around these guys. So that's awesome.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, thankfully you're very competitive because that led to your YouTube channel. And of course, all of your more important accomplishments, like your athletic accomplishments and what have you. So yeah, folks, check the show notes and the description because this will be on YouTube as well. And follow Matt and needle him a little bit to put out, some new videos or books.
Yeah, I need it.
we would be very fortunate because I think there are a lot of great athletes like you who just think, you know what, it's just, what's the big deal? You just do this and do that. And they don't realize just how precious so much of their knowledge is. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing so much.
Thanks for having me.
It was a real pleasure. So again, guys, check the show notes. Go follow him all over the place. Leave him some nice comments. If you think that his one arm handstand push-up could be better, you can keep that to yourself, or you can post a video.
You can share it. I'm okay. I'm not easily offended. If you got something to say, you can say it. It's cool.
Yeah, I will say that. Yeah, you're a very even-keeled dude. And like I said, I very much appreciative that you were willing to come on and share this great knowledge with us. So again, folks, follow Matthew on YouTube and all the other places you're going to see in the show notes, and hope to do this again sometime.
Yeah, just let me know. Let me know anytime.
You got it. And as always, folks, have fun and happy training.